keep it down. We've given, I believe, over 1 million pages worth of documents to the special counsel. They continue.
We have breaking news regarding an ongoing FBI operation. Sources confirm that agents have raided several locations across the city.
6:23 a.m., Washington, District of Columbia. Foggy Bottom neighborhood. Federal agents wearing tactical vests surrounded a gray limestone building 3 blocks from the State Department. Inside that building sat an office with diplomatic credentials, a liaison office for the Somali Supreme Court. But this morning, it would no longer hide behind those credentials, because what federal investigators had uncovered was not a legal administrative office. It was a financial pipeline moving $610 million through fabricated humanitarian organizations. Money that never reached refugees. Money that flowed to warlords, terror networks, and corrupt officials across 3 continents. The raid that morning would expose one of the largest money laundering operations ever discovered operating under diplomatic cover on American soil. Let me show you how deep this went. If you want the full truth about how foreign corruption reached into Washington, hit like so this story reaches more people who need to know what was hidden in plain sight. The investigation did not start in Washington. It started 11 months earlier in Minneapolis, Minnesota. February 14th, a Somali American community leader named Amina Hassan walked into the FBI field office carrying a file folder and a recording device. She'd worked as a bookkeeper for an organization called the Horn of Africa Relief Network. The organization claimed to provide medical supplies and food assistance to displaced families in Somalia and Kenya. Amina had processed invoices, she had reviewed wire transfer receipts, and she noticed something wrong. The amounts sent overseas did not match the amounts recorded in financial disclosures filed with the IRS. The discrepancy was not small. It was $43 million in a single year. $43 million that had simply vanished from the books. The recording Amina brought was from a staff meeting. On that recording, a voice identified as the director, a man named Ibrahim Khalif Osman, discussed routing funds through secondary accounts in Dubai and Nairobi. He specifically mentioned avoiding detection by structuring transfers under $10,000. He mentioned maintaining the appearance of humanitarian work while ensuring certain ministers and officials received their payments. The FBI agent who took that meeting forwarded the case to the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network within 24 hours. What followed was a 9-month investigation that would eventually involve the FBI, Drug Enforcement Administration, Treasury Department's Office of Foreign Assets Control, and Immigration and Customs Enforcement Homeland Security investigations. Agents began tracking financial records. They subpoenaed bank statements from 17 institutions across 4 states. They identified shell companies registered in Delaware, Nevada, and Wyoming. Companies with names like East African Development Fund, Mogadishu Medical Initiative, Refugee Support Coalition, Children of the Horn Foundation. These companies had business addresses. They had employee identification numbers. They had websites with photographs of smiling children and water wells. But they had no actual operations, no staff, no programs. They existed only to receive donations, grants, and wire transfers that would then be redirected to accounts thousands of miles away. Comment exposed if you believe Americans deserve to know when foreign officials exploit our systems. The pattern became clear within weeks. American donors, including private citizens, religious organizations, and even federal grant programs, sent money believing it would help refugees and displaced families. The funds entered these shell NGOs. Within days, the money moved again. Wire transfers to accounts in the United Arab Emirates, cash withdrawals in Nairobi, transfers to accounts linked to government officials in Mogadishu, and a significant portion returned to the United States through real estate purchases, luxury car dealerships, and cash deposits split across dozens of accounts. Agents traced one payment route in detail, a federal grant of $2.4 million awarded to the Horn of Africa Relief Network for emergency medical supplies. The grant entered the organization's account at a bank in Minneapolis on July 9th. On July 11th, $1.8 million was transferred to an account in Dubai registered to a company called Sahara Imports. On July 14th, Sahara Imports wired $1.3 million to an account in Nairobi held by a law firm with ties to Somali government officials. The remaining funds were withdrawn in cash increments and disappeared. Not a single medical supply was purchased. Not one shipment was sent. The entire grant evaporated into a web of false invoices and layered transactions designed to obscure the truth. But the Minnesota operation was not the top of the structure. Every financial trail pointed to the same address in Washington, the Somali Supreme Court Liaison Office on 23rd Street Northwest. The office had been established 6 years earlier under an agreement between the Somali federal government and the United States Department of State. Its stated purpose was to facilitate legal cooperation and judicial reform coordination. It had diplomatic credentials. Its staff held special visas. And because of that status, it operated with minimal oversight. Federal agents obtained authorization to conduct surveillance in late August. They installed cameras across the street from the liaison office. They tracked vehicles entering and leaving the building. They recorded license plates. Over 4 months, agents documented 73 individuals visiting the office. Some were attorneys. Some were Somali community leaders. But others were flagged in federal databases. 3 visitors had prior arrests for financial fraud. 1 visitor was under investigation by ICE for human trafficking. Another was linked to the terror group Al-Shabaab in a Treasury Department sanctions list. The liaison office had become a meeting point for a criminal network hiding behind legal protection. Type yes if you're ready to see what investigators found hidden inside. On October 7th, agents executed a search warrant at a storage unit in Alexandria, Virginia. The unit was rented under the name of the Horn of Africa Relief Network. Inside, agents found boxes of falsified financial records stacked floor to ceiling, invoices for shipments that never occurred, receipts from vendors that did not exist, and ledgers written in a combination of English, Somali, and Arabic. One ledger detailed payments labeled as service fees and administrative costs. Those payments totaled $89 million. Next to each payment was a name. Some were abbreviations, others were full names of Somali officials, ministers, judges, military commanders. The ledger was a map of corruption spanning 2 continents and 6 years of coordinated theft. The case reached a critical decision point in late November. The FBI's International Corruption Unit presented evidence to the United States Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia. The evidence included financial records showing $610 million moving through the network over 5 years. It included communications intercepted under FISA warrants showing coordination between the liaison office staff and operatives in Somalia and Kenya. And it included testimony from Amina Hassan and 2 other whistleblowers who had worked inside the shell organizations. The prosecutors authorized a coordinated raid, not just on the liaison office, on 12 locations simultaneously across 4 states. The operation was named Sentinel Accountability. Planning began in December. The FBI formed a task force that included agents from the Financial Crimes Section, the Criminal Investigative Division, and the Counterterrorism Division. DEA agents joined because some wire transfers were linked to individuals involved in narcotics trafficking in East Africa. ICE Homeland Security investigations contributed agents experienced in transnational financial crimes. The United States Marshals Service provided tactical support. In total, 170 agents were assigned to the operation. The targets were mapped: the liaison office in Washington, the Horn of Africa Relief Network headquarters in Minneapolis, a house in Columbus, Ohio, where financial records were believed to be stored, an office in San Diego connected to another shell NGO, residences in Alexandria and Silver Spring, Maryland, linked to individuals named in the ledgers, and bank branches in New York where accounts would be frozen and records seized. The operation required precise timing. If one location was alerted, evidence could be destroyed within minutes. Shredding machines, fires, digital wipes. The window for success was narrow. If this shocks you, hit like now and keep watching. The order came at 4:30 a.m. on January 16th. Agents received final briefings. They reviewed floor plans. They confirmed communication channels. They loaded into vehicles and moved into position. In Washington, 23 agents gathered 2 blocks from the Liaison office. The building was quiet. No lights, no movement. Fog covered the street like a blanket. Engines stayed running. Radios were silent except for position confirmations. At 4:47 a.m., the command was given, "Go." Agents moved fast. A battering ram struck the front door. The lock shattered. Wood splintered. Agents poured inside, shouting commands. Federal agents, search warrant, hands visible. The first floor was an office space. Desks, filing cabinets, computers still humming. Agents secured each room methodically. They moved to the second floor. More offices. A conference room with maps of Somalia pinned to the walls, and a locked door at the end of the hallway. The door had a keypad lock. An agent used a breaching tool. The door broke open with a metallic crack. Inside was not an office. It was a records room. Boxes stacked floor to ceiling, filing cabinets with labels in Somali and English, and a safe built into the wall behind a framed photograph of the Somali flag. At the same moment, agents in Minneapolis breached the Horn of Africa Relief Network office. They found staff already inside. 3 individuals attempted to flee through a rear exit. They were stopped. One man tried to throw a laptop into a trash compactor. Agents seized it before it was destroyed. Inside the office, agents found active shredding machines, documents half destroyed, scraps of paper falling like snow, but boxes of intact records remained. Financial statements, donor lists, wire transfer confirmations, and photographs of meetings that included Somali officials and American businessmen shaking hands in hotel conference rooms. In Columbus, agents entered a residence and found a man burning papers in a fireplace. They extinguished the fire immediately and recovered partially burned ledgers. The pages were charred but still readable. In San Diego, agents seized computers and external hard drives from an office that operated under the name Sahel Development Initiative. The office looked legitimate. Professional signage, brochures in the waiting area, a receptionist's desk. But the servers held the truth. Share this so more people understand what was hiding in plain sight. In Alexandria, agents arrested a woman who had served as a financial officer for multiple shell organizations. She had 3 passports: United States, Somalia, and Kenya. She had airline tickets for a flight to Dubai scheduled for later that day. 2 suitcases packed, a rental car reservation. She was planning to disappear. Back in Washington, agents opened the safe inside the Liaison office. Inside were stacks of cash, United States currency bundled in $10,000 increments. The total was $467,000 in crisp bills. There were also documents, contracts between shell NGOs and Somali government entities, letters signed by officials granting privileges and protections, and a list of bank accounts with balances written next to each in blue ink. The balances totaled over $93 million across accounts in 6 countries. Agents moved through every room. They photographed everything. They cataloged every document. They imaged every hard drive. In one office, agents found a wall map of Somalia with red markers on cities and regions. Next to the map was a chart listing names and dollar amounts. The chart was titled Distribution Schedule. It showed payments ranging from $50,000 to $3.2 million. Next to each name was a title: Minister of Interior, Supreme Court Justice, Regional Governor, Military Chief of Staff. The Liaison office was not coordinating judicial reform, it was coordinating bribes. In another room, agents found communication records, printed emails, encrypted messaging logs that had been decrypted by the sender for filing purposes. The messages detailed instructions for moving money with surgical precision. One message from October read, "Split the transfer into 4 parts. Use the Dubai account first, then Nairobi. Keep below reporting thresholds." Another message from August read, "The justice has requested his payment early. Send $1.2 million before the 15th. These were not administrative communications. They were criminal instructions written in plain language with no attempt to disguise intent. Comment justice if you believe everyone involved must be held accountable. The scope of the operation became clearer as evidence was compiled over the following days. The network had operated for at least 6 years. It had created 23 shell organizations across 7 states. It had received donations and grants totaling $834 million. Of that, 610 million had been laundered through offshore accounts and distributed to foreign officials, warlords, and terror-linked operatives. The remaining funds were used to sustain the network, pay operatives, and purchase luxury assets in the United States. Among the seized records, agents found real estate deeds. The network had purchased 11 properties in the United States, houses in Minnesota, Ohio, Virginia, and California, high-end condominiums in Seattle and Washington. The properties were titled to shell companies or individuals with no visible income. The total value was $43.7 million. Agents also found vehicle titles, luxury cars purchased with cash, a Mercedes S-Class sedan, a BMW X7, a Range Rover autobiography, a Maserati Quattroporte, all registered to individuals connected to the shell NGOs. The investigation revealed how the network exploited the American nonprofit system with surgical precision. The organizations filed tax returns claiming charitable status. They solicited donations online and through community events. They applied for federal grants intended for refugee assistance and international development. They produced glossy reports with fabricated success stories, photographs of water wells that did not exist, testimonials from families who were never helped, charts showing impact metrics that were entirely fictional. The deception was systematic and professional, but the most disturbing element was the involvement of individuals within American institutions. The records showed payments to 3 consultants who had helped the network navigate federal grant applications. These consultants had previously worked for government agencies. They knew how to structure applications. They knew what language to use. They knew how to avoid triggering audits. For their services, they received payments totaling $4.6 million. The network also paid 2 attorneys who helped establish the shell companies and open bank accounts. These attorneys operated out of offices in Delaware and Nevada. They specialized in corporate formations for foreign clients. They asked no questions. They filed the paperwork. They provided registered agent services. For their work, they were paid over $2.3 million. The attorneys had created the legal structures that allowed the network to function undetected for years. If you want to see how justice unfolded, type yes below. The raids resulted in 17 arrests on January 16th. The primary target was Ibrahim Khalif Osman, the director of the Horn of Africa Relief Network. He was arrested at his home in Edina, Minnesota at 5:38 a.m. He answered the door in pajamas. He was charged with conspiracy to commit money laundering, wire fraud, and theft of government funds. Also arrested was the director of the Liaison office in Washington, a man named Abdi Yusuf Farah. He held diplomatic credentials, but those credentials did not provide immunity for criminal conduct under the Vienna Convention when crimes were committed on American soil. He was charged with operating an unlicensed money transmitting business, conspiracy to commit money laundering, and acting as an unregistered agent of a foreign government. Other arrests included financial officers, operatives who facilitated wire transfers, and individuals who served as trustees or board members for the shell organizations. Some suspects attempted to claim they were unaware of the criminal nature of the network, but the evidence showed otherwise. Communications, financial records, meeting notes, photographs. They knew exactly what they were doing. They had built a system designed to steal from vulnerable populations while enriching themselves and foreign officials. In the days following the raids, federal prosecutors unsealed indictments. The documents detailed the charges in 243 pages. They included excerpts from intercepted communications. They listed the amounts laundered with precision. They named the shell organizations. They identified the foreign officials who received payments. The indictments painted a picture of a sophisticated transnational criminal network that had operated under the cover of humanitarian work for 6 years, a network that had stolen $610 million intended for refugees and displaced families. The Treasury Department moved quickly. Within 72 hours, the Office of Foreign Assets Control designated 12 individuals and 9 entities for sanctions. Their assets in the United States were frozen. American financial institutions were prohibited from doing business with them. The designations included not only the operatives in the United States, but also Somali officials who had received payments, a Supreme Court justice in Mogadishu, a former minister of finance, a regional governor. The sanctions sent a message that corruption touching American soil would be met with consequences. Share this video so communities understand what was hiding and how corruption harms everyone. The State Department revoked the credentials of the Liaison office on January 18th. The office was closed. The visas of its staff were canceled. The department issued a statement expressing commitment to cooperation with legitimate judicial reform efforts, but zero tolerance for exploitation of diplomatic privileges. The Somali government issued a statement distancing itself from the individuals involved. But the damage was done. The case exposed how weak oversight and corrupted officials had allowed the network to thrive for years. It revealed gaps in the vetting process for foreign liaison offices. It demonstrated how diplomatic status could be weaponized by criminal networks. The financial impact was staggering. $610 million laundered over 5 years. Of that, federal authorities were able to freeze or seize approximately $134.2 million in accounts and assets. That left over $475 million that had already been distributed and was unlikely to be recovered. Money that was intended for refugees. Money that could have provided food, medical care, shelter, and education. Instead, it enriched officials and criminals living in luxury while vulnerable families suffered. The human cost was harder to quantify. Thousands of donors believed they were helping vulnerable families. Religious communities had organized fundraising drives. Individuals had contributed savings. Federal grant programs had directed taxpayer funds toward what they believed were legitimate humanitarian efforts. All of it was based on lies. The betrayal of that trust was profound. The damage spread through communities, through institutions, through the belief that systems work fairly. In the Somali American community, the reaction was mixed. Many expressed anger and shame that individuals claiming to represent their community had engaged in such crimes. Community leaders issued statements condemning the network and calling for accountability. But there was also concern that the case would lead to increased scrutiny and suspicion of all Somali organizations, concern that legitimate groups working to help refugees would face funding cuts and donor hesitation. Those concerns were not unfounded. Within weeks of the raids, several Somali American nonprofits reported donor withdrawals and grant rejections. Organizations that had nothing to do with the criminal network found themselves answering questions and facing audits. The actions of a few had cast a shadow over many. That is one of the cruelest aspects of large-scale corruption. It erodes trust not just in the guilty, but in entire communities and institutions. Comment your thoughts below on how we protect systems from corruption. The case moved through the courts over the following months. Arraignments were held. Bail was denied for most defendants due to flight risk. Several possessed foreign passports. Several had financial resources hidden overseas. The evidence against them was overwhelming. Prosecutors offered plea agreements to lower-level operatives in exchange for testimony against the leaders. Some accepted, others refused, believing they could fight the charges. The trial for Ibrahim Khalif Osman and Abdi Yusuf Farah was scheduled for 8 months later. Prosecutors prepared to present thousands of documents, financial records, intercepted communications, and witness testimony. The defense attorneys argued their clients were simply administrators who were unaware of the full scope of the operation, but the prosecution had communications showing both men explicitly discussing the laundering process, the payments to officials, and the need to avoid detection. The defense strategy was weak. As the case unfolded, additional investigations were launched. The FBI opened inquiries into other nonprofit organizations with similar patterns. The IRS initiated audits of charities operating in East African assistance programs. The Department of Justice formed a task force focused on foreign corruption exploiting American nonprofit and diplomatic systems. The case had revealed a vulnerability, and vulnerabilities, once exposed, require a response. The broader implications were significant. The case highlighted how diplomatic credentials and nonprofit status can be weaponized by criminal networks. It demonstrated how weak oversight in the nonprofit sector creates opportunities for fraud. It showed how transnational corruption can operate across multiple jurisdictions, making detection difficult. And it revealed how individuals within American institutions, consultants, attorneys, and others can enable such networks for profit. The investigation also raised questions about the vetting process for foreign liaison offices. How had the liaison office operated for 6 years without triggering alarms? How had it maintained diplomatic credentials while serving as a hub for financial crimes? The answers pointed to systemic gaps, limited resources for monitoring, assumptions that diplomatic entities would self-regulate, a lack of coordination between agencies. Those gaps had been exploited with precision. Hit subscribe so you don't miss updates on how this case unfolds. The case sent a message to other networks. Federal law enforcement is watching. Financial